a kind of a new think tank called the Brookfield Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. It's based out of Ryerson, and I'm actually here to talk about kind of, broadly speaking, sort of what maybe post-secondary institutions can really play in that kind of policy innovation and civic innovation space. And I have a very selfish reason for being here because it just so happens that this is actually something I have to actually work on in my daytime job. And I thought that this would be something that perhaps the civic tech community would be interested in. Would definitely love your feedback. This is actually the first time I shared this in a public audience. So bear with me if it's a little rough around the edges. So I kind of want you to imagine that you are a student, or public servant, or maybe like yourselves, people interested in civic tech, or you're just a citizen that's very interested in looking to contribute to kind of the public good with innovative ideas, hopefully achieve desirable policy outcomes. Bonus points to people who know what building is on the left. Does anyone actually know what building that is?
The insurance building?
No. Asher, you should know. It's Whitney Block.
Is it?
Yes, it's Whitney Block.
Well, I worked over in ugly old Boyd, so.
Still not as bad as Frost.
So right now, if we kind of think about it, we're all here in this room because we desire and are clearly willing to commit time to sort of make our cities, our provinces, ultimately our countries a better place to live. And this is typically this is what governments are looking to do, and they try to do that. But right now, they definitely are looking for help. Like right now, governments, they face immense pressures right now to deliver more with less. There's kind of a recognition that they need to be more agile, more innovative in their approaches, and the recognition that governments themselves do not have, and I quote, a monopoly of good ideas. So this is something that Steve Orsini, who's the Secretary of Cabinet to the Ontario Public Service, actually just said, we actually need to be more innovative and agile to stay relevant, because right now governments can't do things on their own. So part of how they are looking to do that is that they're kind of looking to collaborate externally with partners, such as hopefully maybe the civic tech community, to achieve sort of desirable policy outcomes. And one of those partners could be post-secondary institutions, which is who I'm here to represent. Because I'm at Ryerson, what does that actually look like at Ryerson? So I'm kind of here to present this kind of project that is kind of going on that I'm sort of leading, and would definitely love your feedback on. Is the working name we have for it is the Policy Innovation Platform. And kind of the steps it sort of takes is kind of like this. So there's kind of a problem-finding kind of phase. So Ryerson kind of works with governments to find and identify policy challenges to kind of address. So that's kind of like a negotiating with governments. Like, what problem do you guys actually have that we can solve that maybe you yourself can't solve? Then kind of the next step is sort of the idea, which is where the Policy Innovation Platform comes. So we kind of curate a process for participants to actually solve these type of challenges and maybe generate ideas. That could look like a case competition, a hackathon, a design jam, whatever the case is. So that's nothing really, really new. That this has always existed. I'm sure some of us have been to hackathons. Where we actually can differentiate ourselves from, say, other type of events and processes like this is actually the third step, where we can actually, one of the challenges with hackathons and design jams or whatever the case is, there are these ideas that emerge. There's probably something to them, but where do they go after? And this is actually where Ryerson can step in. This is actually probably our biggest value add, is that we can actually take these ideas and actually kind of incubate them through, so there's a program which I'll talk about in Ryerson called Zone Learning to actually develop them further and kind of ensure that the kind of ideas you develop tries to achieve a problem-solution fit. That's the hunch. And then once these ideas are developed, we can actually go about and try to implement them. So once the ideas are developed to a point where there's ideally some traction with a problem-solution fit, can take it back to government, be evaluated, and it can be actually be considered for implementation adoption. That could look like anything from procuring your service to even just doing an announcement on what emerged. So why Ryerson? Multidisciplinary teams from many different disciplines. I heard Henrik saying just bringing diverse mindsets together. So it would be great if we have a policy student and a design student and an engineering student kind of work together and bring that multidisciplinary approach. And that's very, very integral to how Ryerson kind of sets up is part of the zone learning. one great thing that Ryerson can do is we can actually own the risk. This is actually, so kind of the question is like, well, what can a university do that that the governments can do? Governments can do research, like they have that capacity, and of course Ryerson has that capacity. So if we do that research, that's not much of value add. What we can actually do is actually take kind of risky ideas and experiment with them, and we can actually own that risk, whether they go somewhere or not. We can also sort of be neutral conveners with there's a lot, post-secondary institutions are supposed to exist as places of intellectual freedom, dialogue, debates. Governments themselves aren't necessarily always perceived as a neutral party. I'm not saying that universities aren't always perceived as that, but I think it's fair to say, my hunch is that I think a university definitely has more of that neutrality perception. And then, of course, we also have a lot of assets to take ideas very far, and this speaks to kind of step 3 in the incubation stage. So this is just a good example of like the type of zones and things that participants can actually use. So probably the most famous one is the DMZ. Can't call it the digital media zone anymore because apparently they rebranded. Don't ask me why. There's a bunch of like other sort of zones they have, and the way to think about zones is that they're actually incubators that Ryerson has, and actually this list is outdated because they have a lot of incubators. Where we're from is from the Brookfield Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, and kind of so let me just talk about the whole zone learning kind of approach that Ryerson is trying to have. So the whole idea with zone learning is that it's kind of an approach to entrepreneurial and experiential education, and it kind of enables a student-led process where students can actually take ideas that they have and actually develop into tangible products and services, and they can actually get a course credit for that. So that's kind of the idea, and that's sort of the vision behind it. That's what we hope will be the kind of the follow-up process after we run a hackathon or a design jam. And it's a hunch. We don't actually know if it will work or not. What's great about Ryerson and Sheldon Levy is that he kind of doesn't care. Not that he doesn't care, it doesn't work, but he's willing to experiment to see where it goes. So that's kind of what we have. And to be honest, Ryerson's not really breaking the ground. So other universities have tried stuff like this, maybe not as student-led as we have. So for example, University of Chicago's Urban Labs is a great example. They have 5 different type of labs. I forget them all. I believe they have a crime lab, a poverty lab, an urban education lab, and I forget the other one, where they take a bunch of students and academics. The city of Chicago actually gives them policy challenges, and these labs will convene stakeholders to actually try to solve whatever policy challenge it would be. The Change Labs is based out of Stanford. It's kind of the same concept. Radius is something that's run out of Simon Fraser University. It's very much a social innovation lab and venture incubator, so kind of their equivalent of something like this space or a Center for Social Innovation, where they actually give office space to students to kind of work and develop their kind of community-driven type ideas. And then there's City Studio in Vancouver, who I don't know if any of you have heard, and the whole idea of that is like it's a partnership with many universities, UBC, I believe Simon Fraser, and I forget what other universities, and they partner with the city of Vancouver, where the city of Vancouver actually assigns the staff. Like one of the conditions to actually work on a project is there has to be an assigned staff, like a public servant from the city of Vancouver that can actually work with these students to actually try to tackle and do some city building type projects. So that's what Ryerson is trying to replicate. I mean, our model is a little different in that there definitely is more of a student-driven component. So kind of where are we at right now? So right now we're working with the Ontario Public Service to kind of use a platform to solve a particular provincial policy challenge. And we're also in discussions with the City of Toronto at the moment to see if they're willing to sort of test out the platform as well. So kind of the very first challenge we got was actually from the Ministry of Economic Development, Employment, and Infrastructure. And this is kind of the working question we have is how can we accelerate dialogue and accessibility with the goal of helping to shift attitudes and change behavior? You probably are wondering, like, is that actually like a policy question where you can use policy leaders to actually solve that? So it's an interesting kind of question that they're giving us, and it's something that we are still kind of working with. But the whole idea of that is that we would want to build multidisciplinary teams around trying to attack. And what the solution looks like, we don't. Kind of one of our principles is that we're not going to try to prescribe the solution. Like our principle is very, very much fall in love with the problem, not the solution. So really try to understand kind of the problem, because I guess speaking personally as someone who's been to hackathons is that typically, like in my experience, and perhaps your experience is very, very different is that people come in with a solution in mind and then they build it, and then it's a solution in search of a problem to solve. And that's something we're trying to be very intentional and cognizant about. So that's just my experience. Perhaps you have a very different experience. And so I came here with particular asks. And I will tell you about kind of the key dates we kind of have coming up. So the timeline we have is very, very aggressive. So the very first kind of thing we want to do to try to tackle that particular challenge is run some sort of staggered kind of, we're not really sure what to call it, design jam, hackathon, charrette. I'm not particularly sure. We haven't quite clearly figured out what the branding behind that is, and the whole idea rather than staggering it, rather than doing it kind of like a mad sprint on a weekend, is just building that time to reflect and actually do work and actually get those user insights that you need. And kind of the asks that I have is that we kind of have like 3 particular roles that hope that maybe some of you might be interested in. So there's a role to actually facilitate the process. And so if you are interested in that, my colleague Arjun Gupta has a few sign-up sheets. We also have, like, if you're interested in participating, like, this is not just for students. Like, part of the value add for students is that they get to work with real-life professionals, like people out in the real world, and that's a lot of value for them. So that's something you can do. Or also, there's also a mentorship role. Part of the whole zone learning approach and working with this is that there are actual mentors they can actually get advice from. So those are kind of the 3 roles we sort of have that hopefully some of you are interested in. And so that's kind of where I'm at the moment.